On the morning of May 16, 2008, the Talwar family's world was shattered in their Noida apartment, a place that had always been their sanctuary. What began as an ordinary day would soon become one of the most infamous mornings in Indian criminal history. 14-year-old Aarushi Talwar, a bright and beloved only child, was found murdered in her bed by her parents, Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Nupur Talwar. The discovery was so sudden and devastating that it left the family in utter disbelief. Their lives changed forever in a single horrifying moment. The initial shock quickly turned into chaos as the family's domestic help, Hemraj, was nowhere to be found. In the confusion and panic, suspicion immediately fell on him. The Talwars, still reeling from their loss, could barely process the growing sense of dread as neighbors and relatives gathered, whispering theories and fears. Police arrived at the scene, focusing their attention on Hemraj as the likely killer. With no sign of him in the apartment, they assumed he had fled after committing the crime, and the search for him began almost immediately. The scene in Arushi's room was brutal. Her throat had been slit, her head bludgeoned. The violence of the act was shocking, even to the most seasoned investigators. Bloodstains and signs of struggle painted a grim picture of what had transpired during the night. The community was stunned. How could such violence strike in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood? People who had always felt safe in their homes now looked at each other with suspicion and fear as the news spread like wildfire. The Talwars' grief was soon overshadowed by a police investigation that turned their home into a crime scene. Every corner was examined, every object scrutinized for clues as the family watched helplessly. Friends and family, hoping to comfort the Talwars, found themselves in a house swarming with officers and forensic experts. The air was thick with tension, grief, and unanswered questions. The tragedy was no longer private. It was rapidly becoming a public spectacle. News crews and reporters gathered outside, broadcasting every development to a nation hungry for answers. The missing Hemraj remained the prime suspect, his side of the story unheard. Posters with his face appeared, and the hunt for him intensified. But the truth was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The Talwars, in mourning, were thrust into the center of suspicion. The media's relentless coverage only added to their agony, as every action and word was dissected for clues. Every memory in their home was now tainted by violence and scrutiny. The laughter and warmth that once filled their rooms had been replaced by silence, suspicion, and the constant presence of strangers. The first hours were a blur of questions and accusations. The Talwars, still in shock, struggled to comprehend the nightmare unfolding around them as investigators pressed for answers. No one could have predicted that this was just the beginning of a national mystery. The story would soon grip the entire country, sparking debates and dividing opinions. The case would soon spiral into one of India's most infamous and controversial investigations, with twists and turns that would baffle even the most experienced detectives. The search for answers had only just begun, and the truth, as it would turn out, was far more elusive than anyone could have imagined. For an entire day, police hunted Hemraj, the domestic help who had seemingly vanished without a trace. Convinced he was the killer, his photo was circulated widely among law enforcement agencies and the public. The media echoed the theory of a servant's betrayal, sensationalizing the story and fueling public outrage. But on May 17th, a retired officer noticed something that had been overlooked: bloodstains leading to the terrace. The locked terrace door was opened, revealing a gruesome sight. Hemraj's body was found, throat slit, head bludgeoned, just like Aarushi. The police had spent 24 hours searching for a man who was dead above their heads the entire time. The crime scene on the terrace was compromised by the intense heat and the passage of time, destroying crucial evidence. The initial theory collapsed instantly. Hemraj was a victim, not a suspect. The police were left in shock. With no suspects and a double homicide on their hands, the investigation took a grim turn. Their failure to secure the scene and find Hemraj earlier was a critical blunder that would haunt the investigation. This mistake set the tone for the entire investigation, one marked by missteps, lost opportunities, and growing public distrust. The case was now a baffling mystery with no clear answers, leaving everyone involved frustrated and confused. The hunt for the real killer had to start over with fresh eyes and renewed determination. The Noida police's handling of the case was disastrous. The crime scene was contaminated by visitors, erasing vital evidence. Key items like Aarushi's clothes and bedsheet weren't collected properly. The failure to find Hemraj's body for a day allowed evidence to degrade. Investigators clung to their initial theory, ignoring other possibilities. Forensic evidence was mishandled. Murder weapons were never conclusively found. The chain of custody was weak, making evidence unreliable in court. Public outrage grew as the investigation stalled. The case was a mess, and a new team was desperately needed. The foundation for justice was already crumbling. Under pressure, the case was handed to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, on May 31, 2008. The CBI, led by Arun Kumar, started fresh but inherited a tainted crime scene and flawed evidence. They dismissed the parents as suspects and focused on 3 men, Krishna, Rajkumar, and Vijay Mandal. Narco-analysis tests led to their arrest, with a theory of a drunken brawl turned deadly. But no physical evidence linked them to the crime. The CBI released the men for lack of proof. The investigation hit another dead end. Hopes for a quick resolution faded as the case grew more complex. The case became a media sensation, with 24/7's coverage turning tragedy into spectacle. The Talwars' private grief was dissected on national television. The media fueled rumors, painting the parents as villains without evidence. Sensational theories, honor killing, affairs were broadcast as fact. This media trial pressured investigators and shaped public opinion. The relentless spotlight blurred truth and speculation. The media's role became central, often overshadowing the facts. 2 CBI teams, 2 opposing theories. Arun Kumar's team blamed the domestic helpers, suggesting a drunken fight led to murder. But with no evidence, that theory collapsed. In 2009, a new CBI team led by AGL Kaul reversed course, targeting the Talwars. They claimed the parents killed Aarushi and Hemraj in a fit of rage using circumstantial evidence. The theory, no outsiders entered, only the parents could have done it. Alleged motives and supposed cover-ups were cited, but no direct evidence existed. The CBI's flip-flop created confusion and eroded trust. Years were wasted chasing conflicting narratives. The public was left bewildered, justice further out of reach. The case now had 2 mutually exclusive stories, neither proven. The truth seemed more elusive than ever. In 2010, after years of public speculation and intense media coverage, the CBI filed a closure report in the case, citing a lack of conclusive evidence to charge anyone with the crime. Yet, in a controversial move, the report named the parents, Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Nupur Talwar, as the prime suspects, casting a long shadow of doubt over their innocence. The Ghaziabad court refused to accept the closure, instead ordering that the Talwars stand trial for the murder of their own daughter, a decision that shocked many and divided public opinion. The prosecution's case was built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. There was no sign of forced entry, and the last seen theory placed the parents as the only adults present that night. They also alleged that the crime scene had been manipulated, suggesting an attempt to cover up the truth. The defense, however, argued that the evidence was not only weak, but riddled with inconsistencies and gaps. They pointed out that crucial evidence had been contaminated by police errors, and that the investigation was marred by procedural lapses from the very beginning. The defense team challenged the CBI's findings at every turn, highlighting alternative possibilities and raising questions about the reliability of the investigation. They argued that the possibility of outsider involvement had not been properly explored, and that key leads were ignored or dismissed too quickly. In November 2013, after a lengthy and highly publicized trial, the court found the Talwars guilty of murder, sentencing them both to life in prison, a verdict that sent shockwaves across the nation. The verdict seemed to confirm the narrative that had dominated the media for years, painting the Talwars as guilty in the court of public opinion long before the trial ended. But for many, the outcome felt deeply unsettling, a miscarriage of justice, where questions remained unanswered and doubts persisted. The conviction, critics argued, was based more on a compelling story than on irrefutable proof, leaving the truth forever clouded in uncertainty. The Talwars went to jail, but the case continued to haunt the public imagination. doubts lingered, and the sense of injustice only grew stronger with time. Was this truly justice, or simply a rush to judgment? The debate raged on, echoing in courtrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms across the country. The Talwars appealed their conviction, arguing the evidence was too weak. After 4 years in prison, the Allahabad High Court acquitted them in 2017. The court criticized the CBI's investigation and the trial court's reasoning. The evidence was incomplete, the links broken, and the motive unclear. The principle of reasonable doubt prevailed. Better to free the innocent than convict without proof. The Talwars walked free, but the mystery remained. If not the parents, then who? With all suspects cleared, the case returned to square one. The CBI's appeal to the Supreme Court is still pending. The public was left with more questions than answers. Justice for Aarushi and Hemraj remained elusive. 16 years later, the Aarushi-Hemraj case is still unsolved. The CBI's appeal is pending, but the investigation is at a standstill. The case exposed deep flaws in India's police and investigative systems. Botched crime scene management and shifting theories eroded public trust. The CBI's contradictory approaches highlighted institutional weaknesses. The tragedy is not just the loss of 2 lives, but the failure of justice itself. The case is a mirror to the flaws in police, media, and legal processes. Until the truth emerges, the silence remains a haunting reminder of justice denied.